A billionaire CEO fell in love with a poor girl. He didn't send flowers. He didn't announce himself. He didn't walk up and say a single word. He just came back. Every morning. For 11 weeks. Corner table, dark hoodie, black coffee, no sugar. Watching a girl named Maya Collins. 24 years old, second-hand coat, stitched sneakers. Worked 6 days a week in a mid-range coffee shop. To keep her genius little brother alive. After their mother died of cancer. And their father walked out when she was 9. And left her holding everything. She didn't know his name. She didn't know his face appeared in Forbes. She didn't know that the quiet man in the corner was Nathaniel Cross, CEO of Cross Vault Capital, worth $4.2 billion. She walked past him every morning, like he was furniture. He let her, because Nate Cross had learned the hard way, that when people find out who you are, they stop seeing you and start seeing what you're worth. So he stayed invisible until the morning a rude customer snapped his fingers at Maya, and Nate Cross spoke across that coffee shop for the first time in 11 weeks. 4 words. She said 4 minutes. And Maya Collins, the girl who noticed everything, finally turned around and saw him. And what she found when she looked was not what she expected. He paid her brother's MIT deposit anonymously. He told her the truth about who he was. He sat in her kitchen in Pilsen and told her about a company worth $18 billion, run by a man who just wanted to sit somewhere real for 45 minutes every morning. She listened. She didn't run. She said, "Don't make promises you can't keep. Just try, that's enough." And for the first time in years, Nate Cross felt something worth protecting. But here is what neither of them knew. While they were finding each other, in that corner coffee shop, his cousin Richard was already moving. His companion Jessica had already chosen a side. A forensic accountant was about to find $340 million in missing money. A letter written 12 years ago and never delivered was sitting in a folder in the wrong man's apartment. And a woman nobody was watching. A woman who had been smiling in the background of every important moment had already decided that the most effective way to destroy Nathaniel Cross was not to take his company. It was to take the girl he loved. So here is what part 2 asks you. What happens when the people who smile the warmest are the ones who have been plotting the longest? What happens when a billionaire's love becomes the weapon used against him? And what happens when a poor girl, with nothing to lose, finally decides she has had enough? Stay right here, because part 2 starts right now, and it will destroy you. The call came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, and it came the way the worst kind of news always comes, quietly, without warning, in the middle of an ordinary moment that you will remember with extraordinary clarity for the rest of your life. Nate was standing at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse on the 31st floor, holding a cup of coffee he hadn't tasted, looking at Lake Michigan. The lake was gray this morning, the sky pressing down on the water with the particular heaviness of a Chicago autumn that had run out of patience for anything gentle. 31 floors below, the city was already in full motion. The Wacker Drive traffic thickening, the river catching no light, the morning carrying the specific indifferent energy of a place that had been doing this for 200 years and intended to keep doing it regardless of what any individual standing at any individual window happened to be feeling. The penthouse itself was the kind of space that expensive architects described as considered 4,000 square feet of clean lines, floor-to-ceiling glass on two sides, furniture chosen for quality rather than display. There were no gold fixtures, no ostentatious chandeliers, nothing that announced its own cost. Edmund Cross had taught Nate early that the loudest rooms belonged to the most insecure people, and Nate had absorbed that lesson the way he absorbed everything Edmund taught him, completely, permanently, without needing to be told twice. The only personal object of any visibility was the photograph on the corner of the working desk, Edmund, late 60s, laughing at something off-camera, the jaw that Nate had inherited catching the light. Nate had placed it there the week after the funeral and had never moved it, not because he was sentimental in any performative way, but because Edmund's face, even in a photograph, had the specific quality of making him think more carefully before he acted. He had needed that quality available to him constantly in the 4 years since Edmund died and left him an empire and a warning, and a grandfather-shaped absence that nothing had come close to filling. His phone lit up on the glass table. Sandra Osai. He picked up before the second ring. "Tell me," he said. Sandra Osai was 44 years old, a forensic accountant with a master's degree from Wharton and 15 years of experience finding money that powerful people had decided should not be findable. She had worked for CrossVault for 4 years. Nate had hired her away from a federal investigation unit by offering her twice her government salary and complete operational independence, which she had accepted not because of the money, but because of the independence. Sandra Osai was the specific kind of brilliant that suffocated under supervision. She wore no-nonsense suits in dark colors, kept her natural hair in a close crop that she had maintained for 20 years, and had a way of delivering catastrophic financial findings with the steady, clinical calm of someone who understood that panic was expensive, and clarity was the only thing that helped. "It's worse than we thought," she said. "How much worse?" "Sit down." "Sandra." "Nate," a pause with real weight in it, "please sit down." He sat on the edge of the working desk. It was the first time Sandra Osai had ever asked him to sit for anything, in 4 years of findings that had included embezzlement, fraud, and one instance of a portfolio company CEO who had been running a secondary business from inside the first one for 3 years. The fact that she was asking now told him more than the words had yet told him. "Richard has been running a parallel acquisition structure for 24 months, she said. "Shell Company, Delaware registration, operating name Vantage Point LLC. No surface connection to him. It's buried under 3 layers of nominee directors, which is why it took us this long to find it. But the beneficial owner, traced through the Cayman Islands entity, is Richard, unambiguously and completely." Nate said nothing. Outside the window, the lake did not move the way he needed it to move, vast and indifferent and proportioning. It just sat there, heavy and gray, pressing down. "He's been intercepting CrossVault's acquisition pipeline. Every target we've analyzed and moved carefully on in the last 2 years. He identified them from internal documents he shouldn't have access to, bought them through Vantage Point at a discount before we could execute, and flipped them through the third entity." "Nate." Her voice dropped a precise fraction, which from Sandra was the equivalent of anyone else's sharp intake of breath. "We've lost $340 million in potential gains, not losses. Gains we should have had that went directly into Richard's pocket." The number sat in the penthouse air like something physical, dense and cold, and occupying space that had previously been breathable. "Frank DeLuca," Nate said. Not a question. His mind had already moved to the mechanism, because the question of how Richard accessed internal documents had one answer, and that answer had a name. 5 years of cultivation, Sandra said. Dinners, golf, a personal loan of $280,000 from a holding account connected to Richard's family trust, never repaid, never reported, never intended to be either. Frank DeLuca has been Richard's inside man since before your grandfather died. Frank DeLuca. Nate built the image of him in his mind with the specific involuntary clarity of genuine betrayal. 61 years old, reading glasses he was always losing, the kind of laugh that filled a room without trying to. He sent Christmas cards to every CrossVault employee, handwritten, every year. He coached Little League on Saturday mornings. He had delivered a eulogy at Edmund's memorial that had made Nate, who had not cried in public since he was 12 years old, press his thumb hard against the inside of his wrist to hold himself together. He had shaken Nate's hand afterward and said, "Edmund was proudest of you, son. Never forget that." Nate had not forgotten it. He would not now be able to remember it without this morning sitting beside it. "There's something else," Sandra said. "Say it." In Richard's personal files pulled from the Cayman Structures document archive, there is a non-financial item. The careful pause of a woman who has learned that some findings require a half-second of preparation before delivery. A letter, handwritten, dated 12 years ago, addressed to Jessica Harlow. Nate went completely still. "In your handwriting," Sandra said. The silence that followed lasted 7 seconds. Nate counted them without deciding to, his mind doing its anchoring thing. The counting, the measuring, the search for something quantifiable to hold onto while the ground shifted. He had been 20 years old. It had been late October, the specific cold of a Chicago autumn that comes in overnight and doesn't apologize. He had sat at the desk in his dormitory room at Northwestern with a single sheet of paper and written, carefully, with the terrified precision of someone who understood that this was not the kind of thing you got a second draft on, a letter to a girl named Jessica Harlow, who was in his social circle, who was smart and dry and genuinely funny in a way that most people in that world weren't, and toward whom he had felt for 8 months. Something that he had no clean language for yet because he was 20 and had not yet learned that what he was feeling had a name, and that the name was falling. He had given the letter to Richard. Richard and Jessica were closer, they'd grown up in overlapping neighborhoods, had the same friends, moved through the same rooms with the ease of people who'd been in those rooms since childhood. Richard had said, "Of course, I'll give it to her tonight." He had smiled the smile that Nate now understood, 12 years too late, had never been a real smile. It had always been a performance, even then. Even at 20 years old, Richard had already been the person he was now, just younger, less practiced, not yet fully aware of his own capacity. Jessica had never responded to the letter. Nate had assumed she'd read it and chosen silence as her answer, which was an answer he respected and moved on from. Because what else do you do at 20 when something doesn't work? You move on. You find Diane. You build things. You get older and quieter and more careful, and you tell yourself the scar is healed because it no longer bleeds openly. It had not healed. He understood that now, standing at the window of his 31st floor penthouse with Sandra Osei on the phone, understanding that the silence had not been Jessica's answer. It had been Richard's. "He never gave it to her," Nate said. "No," Sandra said. "He kept it. It's been in his personal archive for 12 years, and based on the folder it's sitting in next to documents relating to the board gala, relating to Diane Porter, relating to your current, to Maya." Sandra paused. She was not a woman who paused. "He intends to use it. I don't know exactly how yet, but he put it in that folder deliberately." "Send me everything," Nate said. "All of it. Physical copies to Marcus by 6 tonight." "Already sending," Sandra said. He hung up. He stood at the window. 4 minutes of absolute stillness. The kind of stillness that is not peace but its opposite. The stillness of a man holding himself together with the specific discipline of someone who has learned that the most dangerous thing you can do when you are very angry is move too quickly. Then he picked up his phone. He did not call Marcus. He did not call his attorney. He sent a text to a girl in Pilsen who had told him 3 weeks ago, in a kitchen that smelled like instant coffee and Danny's leftover takeout, that she didn't move fast on things she didn't understand yet. "Are you awake?" 3 seconds. Then her response came back with the immediacy of someone who was not only awake, but had been awake for a while, because Maya Collins operated at 5:15 a.m. regardless of what the rest of the world was doing. "I'm always awake at 6:47, what's wrong?" He looked at the message. He thought about what it meant that she knew, from a timestamp and nothing else, that something was wrong. He thought about Danny at the kitchen table 3 weeks ago, looking at Nate across his calculus notebook with the specific measuring gaze of a 17-year-old genius who was deciding whether this man was safe, and then asking without preamble, "What's your actual thesis on distressed asset acquisition?" And the way Nate had answered him directly and completely and without condescension, and the way Danny had nodded once slowly and gone back to his notebook, which Nate had understood correctly, was the highest available form of approval. He thought about Maya watching that exchange from the stove, her back half turned, and the almost invisible softening in her shoulders when Danny nodded. He had been building something, quietly, carefully, the way he built everything. 3 weeks of evenings of conversations that moved slowly and honestly, of a girl who pushed back on every assumption and asked the questions nobody else asked and looked at him, consistently, without variation, like he was a person rather than a net worth figure with a face attached. He was not going to let Richard Cross touch it. "I need to tell you something," he typed. "Tonight, can I come to you?" A pause longer than her usual. "Yes, bring food." Danny ate everything in the refrigerator again. He stared at the message. Somewhere beneath the cold, building fury that had been accumulating since Sandra said Vantage Point LLC, somewhere beneath the specific grief of a 12-year-old letter that had been stolen before it could land, something warm moved through him. Brief and real and entirely inconvenient, and absolutely not going anywhere. He put the phone down. He looked at the city. He picked up his other phone, the one Marcus managed, and said, when Marcus answered on the first ring, "I need Sandra's full package by 6. I need the Cayman documents authenticated by 8. And I need you to find out what Richard is planning for the board gala." "Already on the gala," Marcus said. "Sir, there's something you need to know about the guest list." "Tell me." "Diane Porter landed at O'Hare last night," Marcus said. "She's booked at the Langham 3 nights. Nate closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. Then he opened them. "And Maya Collins," Marcus continued, "received a formal invitation to the gala this morning, delivered by courier to the coffee shop. It appears to be from Cross Vault's events office, but our events coordinator says she didn't send it." The cold in Nate's chest became something else entirely. "Who sent it?" he said. "The courier company traces the order to a personal account," Marcus said. "The name on the account is Beverly Cross." The name landed like a key, turning in a lock that Nate hadn't known existed. Beverly Cross, his cousin's mother, 64 years old. The woman who handed everyone a drink when they arrived and remembered every birthday and had been standing, quietly and warmly and completely unreadably, in the background of every important event in the Cross family for as long as Nate could remember. Edmund's daughter-in-law. A woman so thoroughly present in the comfortable, supportive margins of the family that she had become, to everyone including Nate, essentially invisible. The irony of that word landed with a specific weight. "Increase coverage on Beverly," Nate said. "Immediately, everything." "Understood," Marcus said. Nate hung up. He looked at Edmund's photograph on the corner of the desk. He looked at it for a long time. "You trusted her too," he said quietly to the photograph, to the memory of a man who had been too busy watching Richard to watch Richard's mother. "Didn't you?" The photograph said nothing. The lake outside said nothing. The city kept moving, 31 floors below, indifferent and relentless and entirely unimpressed. Nate Cross put on his jacket, picked up both phones and went to work. Maya's apartment at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday looked the way it always looked, small and honest and carefully maintained, every surface clean, every object in it earning its place. Nate had learned in 3 weeks of visiting that Maya Collins did not keep things that didn't serve a purpose, partly because space was limited, and partly because she had inherited from Carol Collins the specific philosophy that clutter was a form of unfinished business, and unfinished business was a luxury. He arrived at 7:04 with 2 bags of takeout from a Thai restaurant on Blue Island Avenue that Danny had mentioned, offhandedly, during their conversation about distressed asset acquisition. There's this place on Blue Island that does pad see you that's actually worth the $12, and which Nate had remembered the way he remembered everything that mattered, completely and without effort. Maya opened the door before he knocked. She had been watching for the car from the kitchen window, though she would not have described it that way to anyone. She was still in her work clothes, the uniform exchanged for dark jeans and a gray sweater that had been washed enough times to go soft, her hair down for once, which Nate had learned was a signal, though he hadn't said so, that she was in a space where she didn't need to be composed for anyone. She looked at his face. "How bad?" she said. "Let's eat first," he said. "Nate." "Let's eat first," he said again, not deflecting. She could hear the difference between deflection and genuine need. He needed 20 minutes of something ordinary before he said the thing that was going to change the shape of the evening. She stepped back and let him in. Danny was at the kitchen table, composition notebook open, pencil moving. He looked up when Nate set the bags down, registered the Thai food, registered Nate's face, and with the social intelligence of someone who was 17 in age and considerably older in observation, said, "I have a lot of calculus," and picked up his notebook and went to his room and closed the door with the quiet tact of a boy who understood more about adult situations than adults generally gave him credit for. Maya watched him go. Something moved in her face, the specific tenderness of someone watching a person they love be quietly exceptional. They ate. They talked about small things: Danny's MIT preparation, a difficult customer at the coffee shop, the radiator that had started knocking again. Nate had learned that Maya used small talk not as filler but as calibration. She was reading him across these ordinary exchanges, taking his temperature, measuring what was underneath the surface of things. He let her read. He had nothing to hide from her. That was still new enough to feel remarkable. When the containers were mostly empty, and the table had been cleared with the efficient choreography of 2 people who had learned each other's rhythms in the small space of a kitchen, Maya poured 2 cups of coffee, real coffee, not instant, the good kind she bought on sale and rationed, and sat down across from him and said, "Now." He told her everything. He told her about Sandra's call, about Vantage Point LLC and the 3 nominee directors and the Cayman Island structure and Frank DeLuca's Christmas cards and Saturday Little League and $280,000 that was never meant to be repaid. He told her about $340 million in potential gains that had gone into his cousin's pocket through a mechanism so precisely constructed that it had taken a federal-level forensic accountant 4 years of proximity and 1 targeted investigation to find. Maya listened the way she always listened, completely, without interrupting, her coffee cup held in both hands, her eyes on his face. She had the specific quality of a person for whom listening was an active discipline rather than a passive waiting. She processed while he spoke. He could see it. "Richard has been doing this for 2 years, she said when he finished the first part. "At minimum. And the auditor, Frank, has been covering it. Enabling it. There's a difference. Frank didn't build the structure. He just made sure the right eyes never looked at the right places at the right time." "That's worse," Maya said flatly. "Building something wrong from ambition is at least honest about what it is. Covering it up from comfort," she shook her head. "That's a choice made every single day, every audit, every signature. He chose it every time." Nate looked at her. "Yes," he said, "that's exactly right." She held his gaze. "There's more," she said. "Yes." "Tell me." He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He had brought a copy, printed, because he had learned that Maya processed physical things differently than spoken ones, that she liked to hold information, to see it, and he set the photograph of the letter on the table between them. A single page. His own handwriting 12 years younger, the letters slightly larger and less controlled than they were now, the handwriting of someone who hadn't yet learned to contain himself in every medium. Her name at the top, Jessica, and below it, 20-year-old Nate Cross trying to say, in the careful, terrified language of someone who understood the risk but had decided the risk was worth it, that he had feelings for her and wanted to know if there was any chance she felt the same. Maya looked at it for a long time. She didn't touch it. "You wrote this," she said. "Yes. And you gave it to Richard to deliver." "I was 20. He and Jessica were close. He paused. "I was afraid." "And he kept it." "For 12 years. Maya was quiet. She looked at the letter. She looked at his face. She did the thing she always did when processing something significant, a slight movement of the jaw, the internal machinery of her working, the same concentrated look she'd had in the library over the architecture magazines. "He didn't just keep it," she said slowly. "He used the information in it. He knew how you felt about Jessica. He knew you'd moved on from her thinking she rejected you. And he used that to what? Position Jessica closer to you, keep you off balance about that relationship." "I think so, yes." "So Jessica never knew you had feelings for her?" "No. And she's been in this arrangement with you for 18 months not knowing that 12 years ago you..." Maya stopped. She set down her coffee cup. She looked at the letter one more time. Then she looked at Nate with the direct, uncushioned honesty that he had come to understand was simply how she was built. No performance, no softening, no going around the thing when the thing could be addressed directly. "Are you still in love with her?" "No," he said, immediately, without hesitation or decoration. "I don't think I was ever fully in love with her. I was 20 and I thought I was. There's a difference." "But you never got to find out." "No. And now you have to tell her." "Yes." Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Show her the letter. Don't explain it first. Just give it to her and let her read it. People understand things differently when they hold the original." He looked at her. "That's what you would do." "That's what I would want someone to do for me," she said. "If someone had stolen 12 years of information from me, I would want to hold the proof. Not hear about it. Hold it." He nodded slowly. The kitchen was quiet around them, the radiator doing its periodic knock, Danny's pencil audible through the closed door in the way that apartment walls carried sound, the distant city doing what the city always did. "There's one more thing," Nate said. Maya waited. "Beverly Cross sent you an invitation to the Cross Vault Board Gala," he said. "It arrived at the coffee shop this morning, courier delivery, in Cross Vault's name but not from Cross Vault." Maya's expression didn't change on the surface, but something in her eyes sharpened, the specific sharpening of someone whose threat assessment has just updated. "Beverly," she said, "Richard's mother." "Yes. I've never met her." "I know. She sent me an invitation to a gala. She has no official role in organizing." "Yes." Maya was quiet for 4 seconds. "She wants me there," she said. "Yes." "Why?" "I don't know yet," Nate said. "But Beverly Cross has been in the background of my family for 20 years, and I have never once seen her do anything without a specific reason." He paused. "The fact that I've never been able to identify those reasons until now is, I think, the point." Maya looked at the letter on the table between them. She looked at Nate. Outside the kitchen window, 4 stories below on the street, a dark sedan was parked 50 feet from the building. It had been there since 6:45 p.m. Marcus had flagged it at 6:52. The plates traced to a vehicle registered to a rental company, paid for with a prepaid card. Inside the sedan, Beverly Cross sat in the back seat in a charcoal cashmere coat, looking at the light in the kitchen window of Maya's apartment, with the particular expression of someone watching a chessboard. Not with malice, exactly, but with the focused, anticipatory calm of someone who knows exactly which piece is going to move next and has already decided what happens after that. She had been 64 years old for 3 months. She had the kind of face that photographed as warmth, open, fine-boned, the specific grace of a woman who had always understood that how you presented yourself was a more powerful tool than almost anything else available to you. Her hair was silver now, and she wore it deliberately, not apologetically, not trying to undo it, but as a statement of the particular authority that comes from a woman who has stopped competing on youth's terms and started competing on her own. She had grown up in Evanston, the daughter of a judge, in a household where language was precise and argument was a form of respect and weakness was something you identified and addressed rather than displayed. She had married Edmund Cross's eldest son, William, at 26, a good marriage, a genuine one, the kind that is both strategically sound and personally meaningful, which is the best kind. William had been kind and funny and less driven than his father but better-hearted, and Beverly had loved him in the specific way that competent women love kind men, protectively, with clear eyes, understanding his limitations and choosing him anyway. William had died 8 years ago, stroke, 58 years old, which was young enough to be shocking and old enough to be survived. In the months after William's death, Beverly had made a quiet, thorough, and completely private inventory of what remained. The house on Lake Shore Drive, theirs, fully paid. The social capital, considerable, built over 30 years of being the best person in every room at every event. The financial position, comfortable but not extraordinary, because William had never had Edmund's hunger and had been content with comfort. And Richard, her son, 36 at the time, brilliant in the specific way that needed direction, capable of extraordinary things if the right structure was built around him. And then Edmund had died and left everything to Nate, and the structure Beverly had been quietly designing in her mind for 8 years had become, suddenly and urgently, necessary. She did not hate Nate. She wanted to be precise about this, even in her own private thinking. She did not hate him. She thought he was genuinely exceptional, had thought so since he was a boy, had watched him develop with the specific, complicated admiration of someone who recognizes quality and resents its distribution. Edmund had made the right choice for the company. She could acknowledge that. She simply believed that the right choice for the company and the right choice for her son were not mutually exclusive, and that someone needed to build the bridge between those two things, since Edmund had declined too. She had been building that bridge for 4 years. She had identified Maya Collins 6 weeks ago, before Richard, before Jessica, because Beverly Cross watched things that other people didn't know were worth watching. She had followed the flagged report from Marcus's team that Richard had accidentally triggered by having the coffee shop surveilled. He had used a contractor Beverly had introduced him to, and the contractor sent Beverly copies of everything as a professional courtesy she had established years ago and never mentioned to Richard. She had looked at the surveillance photographs of Maya Collins and understood immediately what Richard had not yet understood, that this was not a temporary distraction. This was the specific kind of person, uncalculating, genuinely good, with the particular moral backbone that comes from surviving real difficulty, that could reach the part of Nate Cross that no one had reached since Edmund died. And that meant Maya Collins was not a nuisance. She was the most important piece on the board. Beverly looked up at the kitchen window one more time. The light was warm. 2 silhouettes, she could see them through the glass, the particular body language of people who were being honest with each other in a small space. She felt something that she would not have called guilt. Guilt implied regret, and she had not yet reached the part of the plan that would require regret. What she felt was closer to the specific, cold clarity of a chess player who has found the queen on the board and understood that everything now depends on how the queen is moved. "Take me home," she said to her driver. The sedan pulled away from the curb. The kitchen light stayed on. Above it, Danny Collins was at his desk with his composition notebook open to a page of calculus notes, between which was folded a single printed sheet from a financial watchdog forum that he had been thinking about every day for 6 months, and had decided tonight he was going to show his sister. But not tonight. Tonight she had enough. He turned back to his calculus. The pencil moved. Outside his window, the city kept doing what the city always did: loud, indifferent, relentless. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, in a kitchen in Pilsen that smelled like Thai food and good coffee, and the specific warmth of people being honest with each other in a small space, Maya Collins picked up the photograph of a 12-year-old letter and looked at Nate Cross and said, "We need to be 3 steps ahead of all of them. At the same time." "I know," he said. "Can you do that?" He thought about Edmund, about the warning, about the difference between building something and owning something. "Yes," he said, "but I'm going to need your help." She looked at him for a long moment. "I've been holding things together with thread and math since I was 9 years old," she said. "I think I can manage." He almost smiled. "I know you can," he said. And in the kitchen of a 1-bedroom apartment in Pilsen, 2 people who had found each other in the most ordinary possible place began to plan the most extraordinary possible response to the most deliberate and personal kind of betrayal. The city kept moving outside. It did not know what was coming. The Crossvault Capital Annual Board Gala was held every October at the Meridian Grand Ballroom on the 42nd floor of the building that housed the company's headquarters, a room that existed for exactly this purpose. Events that projected the specific image of an organization that was powerful without being aggressive, successful without being flashy, the kind of wealth that wore navy rather than gold and made you feel the difference. The room could hold 300 people comfortably. Tonight it held 276, every one of them selected with the care that Nate's events team brought to the guest list every year: board members, portfolio company executives, strategic partners, a precisely calibrated handful of press. The flowers were white and architectural. The lighting was warm and specific. The bar was open but understated: good wine, good whiskey, nothing that encouraged excess, because excess was a message and Crossvault's message was always control. Nate arrived at 7:15 p.m. in a dark navy suit that had been made for him by a tailor on Oak Street who had been making his suits for 6 years, and who understood that Nate's requirements were simple: fit perfectly, announce nothing, last a decade. He moved through the room the way he always moved through rooms, with the particular contained authority of someone who didn't need to perform confidence because they were simply structurally confident. People turned toward him as he passed the way plants turn toward light. Not dramatically, just steadily, the way things move when they have no choice about it. Marcus was at the perimeter, in the specific kind of black suit that security professionals wear at events where they are not supposed to look like security. He had positioned 4 additional team members at intervals that covered every entrance. He had briefed Nate in the car on the way over with the focused efficiency of a man who had done protective detail for 1 Secretary of State and 2 federal judges, and had decided, upon meeting Nate Cross, that this was the most interesting principal he had ever worked for. "Diane Porter arrived at 6:50, Marcus said through the earpiece. "She's with Richard, east side of the room near the windows. She looks uncomfortable." "She should," Nate said quietly. "Beverly is already here. She arrived at 6 sharp. She's been working the room since then. She's spoken to Gerald Flynn twice and 3 board members I flagged." "Gerald Flynn," Nate said. "I know," Marcus said. Gerald Flynn was 72 years old and had been Crossvault's board chairman for 11 years, appointed by Edmund, retained by Nate, a man of such thorough establishment respectability that his presence at the head of the board table had functioned for a decade as a kind of institutional guarantee. He was tall, white-haired, the kind of handsome that age had refined rather than diminished, with a wife named Alina who volunteered at schools, and a daughter who ran a nonprofit, and a son-in-law named Dr. Craig Crane who worked in hospital administration, and was married to a physician named Patricia. Nate had been carrying that name, Patricia Crane, since Sandra had mentioned it 2 days ago, in the context of a thread that began with Carol Collins photographing documents in a client's apartment and ended with a cancer diagnosis that came too late. He had not yet told Maya. He was still verifying. He was still making sure he understood the full structure before he touched any part of it, because Maya had already survived her mother's death, and he was not going to hand her an incomplete truth about it and let it land wrong. He was going to hand her the complete truth, with everything verified, at the right moment. He was running out of time to find that moment. He moved through the room, shaking hands, receiving greetings, performing the specific social discipline of a CEO who understands that every interaction at an event like this is a communication whether you intend it to be or not. He spoke to 2 board members about portfolio performance. He spoke to a journalist from the Tribune about CrossVault's third-quarter results. He was pleasant and focused and gave absolutely nothing away. At 7:45, the elevator doors opened, and Maya Collins walked into the CrossVault Capital annual board gala. She was wearing a dress that Nate had not seen before, deep green, simple cut, the kind of dress that worked because it understood the body wearing it and didn't try to compete with it. Her hair was up. She wore small earrings that caught the light once and then stopped trying. She had a bag that was not expensive and didn't need to be. She walked into the room with the specific quality she always had, the quality of someone who was entirely present in their own body, who took up exactly their own space, who looked at a room full of 276 wealthy and important people, and registered it with the same calm attention she brought to the morning rush at Grounds and Glory. She did not look intimidated. She did not look performing. She looked like Maya Collins, which was Nate understood with a clarity that moved through him cleanly and completely. The most dangerous thing she could possibly look like in this room, because Beverly Cross had invited her here to be destroyed by her own contrast to this world, and contrast only worked on people who were diminished by it. Maya Collins was not diminished by anything. Nate moved toward her. He reached her in 45 seconds, crossing the room without rushing, arriving beside her the way he arrived at things inevitably, without announcing the intention in advance. "You came," he said. "You told me to," she said. "I told you it was your choice." "I made my choice," she said. She looked at the room. "Which one is Beverly?" "Far left, silver hair, talking to the man in the charcoal suit." Maya looked. Beverly Cross was across the room, holding a glass of white wine, laughing at something the man in the charcoal suit had said, a laugh that was perfectly timed and perfectly warm, and to someone who was not looking carefully, entirely genuine. She was wearing a dove-gray dress that had been made for her, clearly, and pearl earrings that had probably belonged to someone important. And she had the specific social ease of a woman who had been the best person in every room for 40 years and had stopped noticing it. "She's good," Maya said quietly. "Yes," Nate said. "She hasn't looked at us. She knows exactly where we are." "I know," Maya said. "She hasn't looked because she doesn't need to." Nate looked at Maya. She was watching Beverly the way she watched everything, with the quiet, accurate attention of someone who couldn't afford to be wrong about people. He watched her read Beverly Cross in real time and felt the specific, grounded calm that came from standing next to someone who was not going to panic. Then Richard appeared. He came from the east side of the room, from the windows, from where Diane Porter was standing, and he moved with the particular ease of a man who believes the evening is already going according to plan. He was wearing a dark suit, a pocket square that was slightly too considered, and the smile, the one that was always performing without ever admitting it. He was 36 years old, and looked less like Nate than like a version of Nate where all the edges had been softened, and all the substance had been redistributed into surface. "Nate," Richard said, arriving beside them with the ease of someone for whom arriving beside people uninvited had never felt like an imposition. "You look well." His eyes moved to Maya with the practiced smoothness of a man who had already decided how this interaction was going to land. "And this must be Maya Collins," Maya said. She put her hand out. Her handshake was firm and she held eye contact for exactly the right amount of time, long enough to be direct, short enough not to be a challenge. "You're Richard." Something flickered in Richard's eyes. He hadn't expected her to know him. He recovered in under a second. He was good at recovering, and his smile adjusted by a fraction that most people would not have caught. "I am. Nate's spoken about me." "Not much," Maya said pleasantly, "but I notice things." Another flicker, this one smaller, deeper, and more interesting. "Do you?" Richard said. It was not quite a question. "Constantly," she said, and smiled at him. A real smile, the one that reached her eyes, the one that made people in the coffee shop feel seen, and Richard Cross, for one brief and visible moment, did not know what to do with it. Nate watched this exchange with the focused attention of a man watching a chess match, in which one of the players has just made a move the other player wasn't prepared for. "Excuse me," Richard said, "I need to say hello to Gerald." He moved away, smoothly, without appearing to retreat, though that was what it was. "He wasn't expecting me to know who he was," Maya said, her voice low and even. "No," Nate said. "He's going to recalibrate," she said. "He'll come back with something he thinks I'm not prepared for." "Diane Porter," Nate said quietly. "Tell me about her, quickly, before she comes over." "College girlfriend, 26. She ended things. Said I protected everyone from everything including her." A pause. "She's here because Richard flew to Seattle and paid her to come. I don't know exactly what he's asked her to say. Sandra is still working on that." Maya absorbed this in 3 seconds. "Is she a bad person?" "No," Nate said. "I think she's a person who needed money and made a decision she probably already regrets." "Good," Maya said. "That means she has a pressure point Richard didn't account for." Nate looked at her. "Guilt," he said. "Guilt," she confirmed. "It's the one thing money can't cover permanently." Across the room, Beverly Cross had still not looked at them. She was on her third conversation, moving through the room with the warm, unhurried grace of someone who had nowhere to be and everywhere to be simultaneously. She spoke to Gerald Flynn a third time briefly, just a touch on the arm, leaning in to say something that made him nod once slowly, in the specific way of a man who has agreed to a thing. Nate saw it. "Marcus," he said quietly. "I see it," Marcus said through the earpiece. "Flynn just agreed to something." "I know, I'm repositioning to get closer." At 8:15, Richard Cross crossed to the center of the room and picked up a microphone. This was not on the program. There was no program item scheduled until 8:30. The room noticed the way rooms notice deviations, and conversations tapered and faces turned. "I hope you'll forgive the interruption," Richard said, with the particular warmth of someone who knows the interruption will not need forgiving. "I just wanted to say a few words about CrossVault Capital, about what this company means to this family, and about the future." He smiled. "And I wanted to introduce someone who's been on a great many people's minds lately, someone who has some important things to share about the personal qualities of the people who lead this company." He gestured toward the east side of the room. Diane Porter stepped forward. She was 42, composed in a blue dress that looked like it had been chosen to project honesty, not glamour, not aggression, just a woman standing in a room saying something she had been asked to say. She held a glass of water. Her knuckles were slightly white around the stem. The room was fully attentive now. 276 people turned toward the east windows. Maya put her hand on Nate's arm, not a grip, just a touch, a point of contact. "Let her speak," she said quietly. I know, he said. Don't react, whatever she says. Maya. Nate, her voice was steady as a wall. Let her speak. He was quiet. Diane Porter looked at the room. She looked at Richard, who gave her a small, encouraging nod. She looked down at the glass of water in her hand. And then she looked up and found Nate's face across the room. And she held it for 3 seconds. And what happened in those 3 seconds in Diane Porter's face was something that Beverly Cross, watching from the left side of the room with her white wine and her perfectly timed warmth, had not accounted for, had not prepared for, because Beverly Cross had planned for a woman who had agreed to a price and intended to hold to it. She had not planned for guilt. She had not planned for a woman who had flown from Seattle and sat through dinner with Richard and received a folder of documents and spent 2 nights in a hotel room on the Chicago River, thinking about what it meant to say a thing publicly about a person because someone had paid you to say it, and had arrived at this evening already half broken by her own decision. She had not planned for Diane Porter to look at Nate Cross across a ballroom and find, instead of the closed and protected man she remembered, a man who was standing next to a woman in a green dress and looking at Diane with an expression that was not anger and not hurt and not performance of any kind. That was simply, unmistakably, okay. He was okay. He was more than okay. He was standing there like a man who had found something he hadn't known he was missing, and the finding of it was visible in every line of his body in a way that Diane, who had known him at 26, had never once seen and had always, quietly, wanted for him. She looked back down at her glass. She started. The room waited. Richard waited. Beverly's white wine hand was completely still. I wanted to say. She stopped. The silence lasted 4 seconds. In that silence, 276 people held their breath, and a woman from Seattle made a decision that no amount of money in a folder had been able to prevent her from arriving at. I wanted to say, Diane Porter said, that Nathaniel Cross is a good man, and that whatever anyone in this room has been told to expect from me tonight, I'm sorry. I can't do it. The room exhaled. Richard Cross went very still. Beverly Cross set her wine glass down on the tray of a passing server, with a care that was the only visible sign that anything had gone wrong. Diane looked at Nate. I'm sorry, she said, directly, personally, not for the room, for him, for tonight, and for Seattle. She set her water glass down and walked toward the elevator and pressed the button, and waited for it with her back straight and her hands still, and the specific composure of someone who has made a hard decision and intends to live with it. The elevator opened, she stepped in, the doors closed. The room was completely silent for 3 seconds. Then Nate Cross said, quietly, to no one in particular and to everyone in the room simultaneously, I think we were supposed to be at the remarks portion of the evening at 8:30. Gerald, would you like to proceed? Gerald Flynn, standing 10 feet away with Beverly's third conversation still sitting on him like a coat he was reconsidering, looked at Nate. He looked at Richard. He looked at Beverly, who was looking at nothing in particular and everything simultaneously with an expression that had not changed and would not change. Yes, Gerald said, of course. Richard Cross stood in the middle of the room with a microphone in his hand and 276 people looking at him, and the specific, cold understanding of a man whose opening move has just been removed from the board. He smiled. The smile was impeccable. Please forgive the confusion, he said pleasantly. Please enjoy the evening. He set the microphone down and moved toward the bar with the unhurried ease of a man who was not rattled, and was so visibly not rattled that anyone watching could see exactly how rattled he was. Maya watched him go. He's going to pivot, she said. Whatever the next move is, it's going to come from Beverly, not Richard. Richard just improvises. Beverly plans. What do you think she does next? Nate said. Maya looked across the room to where Beverly Cross was accepting a fresh glass of wine from a server and beginning her fourth conversation of the evening with the same warm, open, perfectly timed attention she had brought to the first three. "I don't know yet," Maya said, "but I know how I'm going to find out." "How?" Nate said. "I'm going to go talk to her," Maya said. Nate looked at her. "Maya." "She wanted me here," Maya said. "She invited me specifically, which means she thinks she knows what I am and what I'll do when I'm standing in front of her." She looked at Nate with the direct, uncushioned certainty of someone who has been reading people accurately her entire life and knows it. "I'm going to show her she was wrong about both." She handed him her bag. She straightened the shoulders of her green dress. She crossed the room. And Nate Cross watched the woman he loved walk toward the most dangerous person in his life, and felt, beneath the fear and the fury and the 4 years of accumulated careful management of his own existence, something he had not felt since Edmund told him he was leaving him the company. He felt completely and without qualification that he was not alone. Beverly Cross saw Maya coming from 20 feet away. She had been watching Maya's reflection in the window beside her third conversation for the past 11 minutes, the specific social skill of a woman who had learned to monitor every room without appearing to monitor anything. She had watched Maya take in the gala, watched her interact with Richard, watched her stand beside Nate with the contained, unperformative steadiness that Beverly had identified 6 weeks ago as the quality that made her both valuable and dangerous. She had watched Diane Porter refuse. She had filed that development with the same clinical efficiency she brought to everything. It was a setback, not a failure. Diane had been one instrument in a larger composition. You didn't stop playing because one instrument went quiet. She watched Maya cross the room and felt the first genuine flicker of something she would not have called respect yet, but was adjacent to it, a recalibration. She had expected Maya to stay near Nate. She had designed the evening, specifically, on the assumption that Maya would stay near Nate, that the instinct of a woman who didn't belong in this room would be to remain attached to the person who had brought her into it. She had been wrong about that. She set down her current conversation, a portfolio executive she would not remember tomorrow, with the smooth, complete attention of someone who had learned to pick up and put down social interactions without leaving visible seams, and turned to face Maya Collins as she arrived. "You must be Maya," Beverly said. Her voice was warm. It was always warm. It was the most dangerous thing about her. "I've heard wonderful things." "I'm sure you have," Maya said pleasantly, "since you've been looking into me for 6 weeks." A beat imperceptible to anyone watching from a distance, Beverly smiled. "You're direct." "It saves time," Maya said. "You invited me tonight. I came. I think we should talk about why." "I invited you because Nate cares about you," Beverly said. "And people who matter to Nate should be part of this world, shouldn't they?" "That's a lovely reason," Maya said, "if it were true." Beverly looked at her. The smile stayed. "You're very sure of yourself for someone who's known my family for 3 weeks." "I'm sure of what I observe," Maya said. "And I've been observing people who can't afford to be wrong my whole life. It makes you accurate." "What have you observed about me?" "That you're the most intelligent person in this room," Maya said. "And that you've been letting everyone believe the most intelligent person is Nate, or Richard, or Gerald Flynn, because intelligent women in rooms like this have learned that being visible is expensive." She held Beverly's gaze. "I recognized it because I do the same thing." Something moved in Beverly's eyes, deep, fast, gone. "We're not the same, dear," she said. The dear was deliberate, a small social demotion, gracefully delivered, the kind of thing that was hard to object to without looking oversensitive. "No," Maya agreed. "We're not. I hold things together for people I love. You dismantle things for people you love." She paused. "Both are a form of devotion. One of them just leaves a lot more damage." Beverly was quiet for 3 seconds. 3 seconds was a long time for Beverly Cross. "You should be careful, Maya," she said. The warmth in her voice hadn't changed. The warmth never changed. Maya was beginning to understand both the instrument and the armor. "You've stepped into something much larger than a coffee shop on Fifth Avenue. I would hate for you to get hurt." "I've been hurt before," Maya said. "I'm still here." "There are different kinds of hurt," Beverly said. "Some of them are public." The warning was so smoothly delivered that a person listening from 2 feet away might have missed it. Maya did not miss it. "Is that what tonight was supposed to be?" Maya said. "Diane Porter, the microphone, the room full of board members, something public." Beverly said nothing. The smile held. "It didn't work," Maya said. "Diane left." "The evening isn't over," Beverly said. And the warmth in her voice, for just a fraction of a second, just a hairline fracture in 40 years of perfect control, was replaced by something else. Not coldness. Certainty. The specific, absolute certainty of a woman who had been playing this game for a very long time and had never once lost. She reached into the small clutch bag on her wrist. She removed a single folded piece of paper, not theatrical, not slow, just efficient, and held it out to Maya. "Since you're direct," Beverly said, "this is direct." Maya took the paper. She unfolded it. It was a photograph. Printed on standard paper, slightly grainy, the quality of surveillance photography taken at distance. It showed Maya in the library, Friday evening, 3 weeks ago, sitting in the 3rd row with an architecture magazine open, her face unguarded in the specific way it was only in that room, the piece that she never showed anywhere else visible in every line of her body. Standing outside the window in the photograph, visible from behind, was a figure in a dark hoodie. The photograph had been taken from an angle that made the figure look less like a man who had stopped while driving past and more like a man who had followed someone and was watching them without their knowledge. The photograph had been cropped. The context had been removed. What remained was a surveillance image of a billionaire CEO appearing to stalk a woman who worked in his regular coffee shop. "This is going to every board member tonight," Beverly said quietly, "and to 3 journalists who are here as guests, along with a statement from a source, unattributable but credible, questioning Nate's judgment, his focus, and the appropriateness of his personal conduct toward an employee of an establishment he frequents." Maya looked at the photograph. She looked at Beverly. "He's not my employer," she said. "I don't work for Cross Vault." "The language in the statement is careful," Beverly said. "It doesn't need to be technically accurate. It needs to be plausible." "You're going to destroy his reputation," Maya said, "with a photograph taken out of context." "I'm going to raise questions," Beverly said. "Questions are all it takes in this world. You plant them in the right soil and they grow on their own." Maya was quiet for a moment. She looked at the photograph in her hand. She thought about Nate at that library window, not predatory, not sinister, just a man who had stopped because he saw something real through the glass and hadn't been able to make himself move immediately. She thought about how that moment had looked to her from the inside, uncertain, genuine, human, and how it looked in this photograph. She thought about her mother, about 14 months of carrying something alone, about the specific cost of being seen by people who use what they see as a weapon. She folded the photograph. She put it in her bag. "Thank you for this," she said. Beverly looked at her. "I'm going to." "I know what you're going to do," Maya said. "I have the photograph now, which means you can't distribute it without me knowing exactly what you've distributed, which means every journalist and every board member who receives it will also receive from me the full context of what that image actually shows." She held Beverly's gaze. "You gave me your weapon. That was a mistake." Beverly's smile did not waver, but something behind her eyes, deep, fast, controlled, moved. "I have copies," she said. "I know," Maya said. "So distribute them, and we'll have a conversation in public about why Beverly Cross was conducting surveillance on a private citizen who works in a coffee shop." She paused. How long has the sedan been outside my building? Beverly's wine glass was perfectly still in her hand. I notice things, Maya said. Constantly, you should have accounted for that. She turned to leave. Your mother, Beverly said. Maya stopped. The room around them was full of conversation and warmth and the clink of glasses. Nobody was watching. Nobody in this room was ever watching the things that mattered. Carol Collins, Beverly said. Her voice was still warm. The warmth was the cruelest thing about her. She worked as a home health aide. One of her clients was Gerald Flynn. Maya turned back slowly. She saw something in Gerald's apartment, Beverly said. Documents, cross-vault documents that she photographed and took to her doctor. Beverly tilted her head slightly. Her doctor's name was Patricia Crane. The name landed. Maya knew the name. She did not know why she knew it yet. It lived in her mind in the background. A name she had encountered somewhere. A piece of a puzzle she hadn't known she was assembling. She would know later, very soon later, that she had seen the name on a document in her mother's file that she had been given after Carol died. A referral note from a specialist that had never been followed up, filed in a folder that Maya had packed into a box and stored in her closet because going through her mother's medical files was the one thing she hadn't yet been able to do. Gerald Flynn is Patricia Crane's father-in-law, Beverly said. Did you know that? Maya said nothing. Your mother's cancer was detected late, Beverly said. Considerably later than it should have been. The symptoms were present for over a year before anyone looked carefully. She paused. Patricia Crane had access to your mother's records, and the specific referrals that should have been made weren't. The ballroom was warm. The lights were warm. 276 people were drinking good wine and making the specific conversation of successful people at events designed to remind them of their success. And Maya Collins stood in the middle of it and felt the floor of everything she had built her survival on shift, not collapse, not shatter, but shift, the specific seismic movement of a foundation being questioned. She thought about her mother saying, I'm fine, and meaning, I cannot afford what the alternative to fine would cost. She had always believed that. She had believed it was Carol's stubbornness, Carol's practicality, Carol's unwillingness to be a burden. The same qualities Maya had inherited, the same qualities that had let Carol leave it too long. She had blamed her mother, quietly in the dark, for leaving it too long. She had never said it to anyone. She had barely said it to herself. But the guilt of that unspoken blame had been sitting in her chest for 14 months alongside the grief. And now Beverly Cross was standing in front of her with a glass of white wine and a warm voice and a carefully placed truth. Not a lie, not quite, but a truth deployed as a weapon, telling her that her mother's death might not have been only stubbornness and bad timing. Why are you telling me this? Maya said. Her voice was completely steady. This was the one remaining thing Beverly had not accounted for that Maya Collins had learned from a woman named Carol Collins, how to absorb a devastating blow while standing upright. Because I want you to understand, Beverly said, the size of what you've stepped into. These people, Gerald Flynn, Richard, all of them, they are not obstacles you can outmaneuver with quick thinking and a green dress, Maya. They have been building this for years. They have reach you cannot imagine. And the people they have hurt. A pause. Your mother is not the only one. You're trying to frighten me, Maya said. I'm trying to inform you, Beverly said. There is a difference. And if I walk away, from Nate, from all of this, you leave me alone. Beverly smiled. You were always free to walk away. No, Maya said quietly. I wasn't. The moment you had someone sit outside my building, I stopped being free to walk away. You made me part of this. That was your second mistake. She turned. She walked back across the room. She walked back to Nate, who saw her face from 20 feet away and moved toward her immediately, the instinct of someone who had learned her face well enough to read weather in it. What did she say? He said. "I'll tell you everything," Maya said. But first, she looked up at him. Her eyes were completely dry. Her voice was completely steady. But he could see it, the thing underneath, the thing she was holding with the specific expertise of someone who had been holding things her whole life. "Your board chairman, Gerald Flynn." "What about him?" "He's connected to my mother's doctor," she said. "And I think I need to verify it. I need to see the file. I need to sit down with it and go through it carefully. But I think someone made sure my mother's cancer wasn't caught in time." Nate went very still. "Nate," she said, "don't react, not here, not tonight." He looked at her. He looked at Gerald Flynn across the room. He looked at Beverly Cross with her white wine and her warm face, and her 40 years of standing quietly in the background of every important moment. "Okay," he said. His voice was completely even. The voice of a man who was feeling something enormous and had made the decision. The same decision Maya had made. The same decision they had both been trained by their different lives to make, to feel it quietly and act on it precisely. "Okay," he said again, "let's go." They left the gala at 9:07 p.m. They walked to the elevator side by side. They did not look back. Beverly Cross watched them go. She sipped her wine. She looked at Gerald Flynn, who looked back at her with the expression of a man who had agreed to something and was beginning to understand the full cost of what he'd agreed to. She looked at Richard, who was at the bar performing ease. She looked at the room. 274 people who had come tonight expecting a gala and had gotten something considerably more complicated. She had made 2 mistakes tonight. She knew it. She was not a woman who wasted time not knowing things. She had underestimated Maya Collins, and she had given her a piece of information, Carol's doctor, Gerald's connection, that she had intended as a warning and that Maya had received as a weapon. She set down her wine glass. She was already designing the next move. But for the first time in 4 years of designing moves against Nathaniel Cross, for the first time since Edmund's will had been read and the plan had begun, Beverly Cross was designing the next move in response to someone else's action rather than in anticipation of it. She was, for the first time, reacting. She did not like how it felt. They drove to Pilsen in silence, not the empty silence of people with nothing to say, but the dense, working silence of 2 people processing the same information from different angles. Marcus drove. The city moved past the windows. Nate sat with his hands still in his lap and his eyes forward, doing the thing he did when he was absorbing something significant, the specific internal stillness of a man running a very large and complicated calculation. Maya sat beside him and thought about a box in her closet. She had packed her mother's belongings in the week after Carol died, with the systematic, grief-suppressing efficiency that she brought to every unbearable task, making it procedural because procedure was the only way through things that had no good way through. Clothes to Goodwill. Medical equipment returned to the rental company. Personal items, photographs, jewelry, the small Bible that had Carol's grandmother's name written inside the cover, into a labeled box that lived on the high shelf of the hallway closet behind the winter coats. The medical file was in there. She knew this. She had put it there herself. The folder the hospital had given her at discharge, the one containing Carol's last 6 months of records, the referral notes, the treatment summaries, the specific clinical language of a disease process that had been documented after the fact because it had not been sufficiently monitored before it. She had not opened it since she put it away. She had told herself it was because the clinical language was cold, and she couldn't bear cold language about her mother. That was true. But it was also true that part of her had been afraid of what accurate information might ask of her, afraid that understanding the mechanics of Carol's death too precisely would produce a grief that was even harder to manage than the one she already carried, because grief with a specific target is more demanding than grief that is simply loss. She had been right to be afraid. She understood that now. The box is in the hallway closet, she said, as Marcus turned onto her street. The file is inside it. We don't have to do this tonight, Nate said. Yes, we do, she said. If I wait, I'll talk myself out of it. He looked at her. He didn't argue. Danny was awake when they came in. It was 9:40, technically past reasonable for a school night. But Danny Collins operated on his own sleep schedule during research periods, and Maya had long ago decided that a genius studying past 10 was a less expensive problem than a genius not studying. He was at the kitchen table with 3 composition notebooks open, and his laptop running a simulation of something she didn't have the mathematics to follow. He took one look at their faces and said, "What happened?" "We're fine," Maya said. "You have the face," Danny said. "What face?" "The one you got when you found out I'd been accepted to MIT, he said. "Like something enormous just happened, and you've decided to be practical about it." She looked at her 17-year-old brother. She thought, not for the first time, that he was going to be remarkable, that the world was going to find out about Daniel Collins and not know what to do with him, which was the specific problem the world had with anyone who was actually exceptional rather than just competent. "Get your notebook," she said, "the one with the forum printout." Danny went completely still. "How do you?" "Danny." He looked at Nate. He looked at Maya. He closed his laptop, opened the middle composition notebook to a page of calculus problems, and removed a folded sheet of paper that had been living between pages 47 and 48 for 6 months. He put it on the table. Maya got the box from the closet. She put it on the table beside Danny's paper. She opened it. Carol's smell came out first, the specific combination of the lotion she'd used and the faint antiseptic of the hospital visits, and something underneath both that was just her, just Carol, just the particular human signature of a woman who was gone. And Maya set her jaw and reached in and found the medical file and put it on the table. 3 documents, on a kitchen table in Pilsen. Danny's forum printout about Vantage Point LLC, which he had found 6 months ago and been sitting with alone. Carol's medical file, which Maya had been sitting with unopened for 14 months, and the photograph Beverly had given her, the library image, surveillance quality, weaponized. "Tell me what you found," Maya said to Danny. He unfolded his paper. 6 months ago, I was using the library computer for my research project on corporate structure, he said, with the specific, clean delivery of someone who had been preparing this explanation for longer than he wanted to admit. "I found a thread on a financial watchdog forum. The thread was analyzing shell company patterns in the Chicago private equity market. One of the cases they used as an example was a company called Vantage Point LLC. The thread identified it as likely connected to a larger parent entity through a Cayman Islands vehicle." He looked at Nate. "They named Crossvault Capital as the probable victim of the scheme. They didn't know who was behind Vantage Point, but the pattern they described matches what Sandra found," Nate said. "Yes," Danny said. He paused. "I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know if it was accurate. And then Maya started." He looked at his sister. "I didn't want to make it more complicated." "You were protecting me," Maya said. "Yes." "By carrying it alone for 6 months." "Oh, yes." Maya looked at her brother for a long moment. She had the expression of a woman recognizing something she had taught without meaning to. "We're going to talk about that," she said. "Later. Right now, does your printout include the forum thread source?" "The thread URL and the username of the person who ran the analysis," Danny said. "I tried to contact them once. They didn't respond." "Sandra can find them," Nate said. He was already typing on his phone. "A financial watchdog analyst who correctly identified a $340 million scheme 6 months ago is either a forensic professional or an institutional investigator who was already looking. Either way, Sandra needs to talk to them." "Done," Nate said, sending the message. He put the phone down. The forum post may be the independent corroboration. We need to take this to the SEC without it looking like a cross-vault internal hit job. Maya was opening her mother's medical file. She did it the way she did hard things, directly, without preparation, without ceremony, because ceremony gave the difficulty a stage, and she had never believed in giving difficulty a stage. She opened the folder and she looked at the first page and she began to read. Nate watched her. He did not speak. He had learned in 3 weeks, through careful observation, that Maya Collins processed difficult information best when she was not being watched for her reaction. So he picked up Danny's forum printout and read it, which gave him something to look at while giving her the privacy of not being looked at. Danny made tea. This was Carol's thing whenever something hard was happening in the apartment. Carol had made tea, not because tea fixed anything, but because it gave your hands something to do, and your mouth something to anticipate, and your body a small, warm thing to hold onto while the hard thing was being processed. Danny had been doing it since Carol died without ever discussing it with Maya. It was the most eloquent thing he had ever not said. Maya read for 11 minutes. She turned pages steadily. Her face did not change. The jaw set a fraction tighter on page 3. Nate caught it in his peripheral vision. She stopped on page 7 and went back to page 5 and read something twice. She closed the folder. She put both hands flat on the table. The referral, she said. Her voice was completely even. Page 5. Dr. Patricia Crane was listed as a consulting specialist. She reviewed my mother's file in January, 14 months before the diagnosis. She marked the file as low priority for follow-up. Maya's hands were flat on the table. My mother had symptoms. They were documented. Dr. Crane saw them and marked the file as low priority. January, Nate said. If someone had looked properly in January, Maya said, the cancer would have been stage 2 at most. Treatment would have been the outcomes for stage 2. She stopped. She was doing the thing she did when something was overwhelming, making it technical, making it a calculation, because calculations had answers and grief did not. My mother might still be alive. The kitchen was completely quiet. Danny set 3 cups of tea on the table. He sat down. He did not say anything. He had learned, living with Maya, that sometimes the kindest thing you could offer someone was simply your presence in the silence. Dr. Patricia Crane, Nate said carefully, is Gerald Flynn's daughter-in-law. Yes, Maya said. And Gerald Flynn has been CrossVault's board chairman for 11 years. Yes. And your mother photographed documents in Gerald Flynn's apartment and took them to Dr. Patricia Crane. Yes. And 6 weeks later, she received a diagnosis that should have come 14 months earlier. Yes. The sequence laid out between them on the kitchen table like a structure, each piece fitting the next with the cold, interlocking precision of something that had been engineered, not improvised, not accidental, engineered. Maya looked at the table. She looked at her hands. She looked at her brother, 17 years old, brilliant, drinking tea in a kitchen in Pilsen, entirely unaware of how close the people responsible for his mother's death had been to him through the person he loved most. I need to verify everything, she said. I need Sandra to verify it. I need it airtight before we do anything with it. I know, Nate said. And I need to know, she said, exactly what Beverly's play is. She told me about my mother tonight. She told me about Patricia Crane and Gerald Flynn, which means she's known for a while, which means she has documentation. She told you, Nate said slowly, because she thought it would break you. She thought I would fall apart, Maya said. She thought I would run. Instead I know, Maya said, which is different from breaking. Knowing is the opposite of breaking. She picked up her tea, she held it. She looked at Nate across the table, at the man who had sat in a corner for 11 weeks because he didn't know how to want something without it being used against him, who had an empire being hollowed out from inside, and a 12-year-old letter sitting in his cousin's folder, and a board chairman who had allowed the delay of a woman's cancer diagnosis to protect financial documents, who had found her in a coffee shop and chosen honesty over strategy, and was sitting in her kitchen in Pilsen at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday holding her brother's tea and being, simply, present. "We're going to take them apart," she said. "All of them, not quickly, carefully, every piece verified, every move documented. We do this right." "Yes," he said. "And Nate," she held his gaze, "Jessica needs to know about the letter, tomorrow, before we move on anything else. She deserves to know." "I know," he said. "She's not the enemy," Maya said. "She made a bad choice for understandable reasons. That's different from the enemy." He looked at her. "You're defending the woman who agreed to help destroy us." "I'm being accurate," Maya said. "You can't build a counterattack on a misread of who people are. Jessica is a lever Richard used. That makes her a victim with bad judgment, not a villain." She paused. "Beverly is the villain." "Beverly," he agreed. "And Gerald." "Yes." "And Richard." "Yes." "And Senator Price," she said. Nate looked at her sharply. "How do you know about Price?" "Beverly mentioned a name during our conversation that she didn't mean to mention," Maya said. "She self-corrected immediately, but I'd already heard it. Harold Price." "She slipped," Nate said. This was the most significant thing he'd heard all evening. Beverly Cross did not slip. Beverly Cross did not make unintentional disclosures. "Unless," Maya said slowly, "it wasn't a slip." Nate looked at her. "You think she gave you Price deliberately?" "I think Beverly Cross is more complicated than Richard understands," Maya said. "I think she loves her son and she wants him to win. But I think I think there's a part of her that knows what she's built and what it costs. And I think Senator Harold Price is something she did not choose freely." "She's under his direction," Nate said. "She's under his control," Maya said. "There's a difference. And I'm not certain, but I think she might be looking for a way out that doesn't cost Richard everything." The kitchen was quiet again. The radiator knocked twice. Danny finished his tea and looked at the composition notebook in front of him and said, "So what do we do?" Maya looked at her brother. She looked at Nate. She looked at the 3 documents on the table, the forum printout, the medical file, the surveillance photograph. And she thought about a woman named Carol Collins who had noticed something in a rich man's apartment and tried to do the right thing and had not been protected, who had been quiet and capable and entirely undefended against people who understood that the easiest way to silence someone was not a confrontation, but a delay. She thought about how Carol would not have called what had happened to her a tragedy. She would have called it a problem, and she would have started solving it immediately with whatever she had available. "We find Senator Price's connection to Cross Vault," Maya said. "Danny's forum printout, Sandra's Cayman documentation, and whatever is in Gerald Flynn's apartment that my mother photographed, we find all of it. We verify all of it. And then we present it not to the board and not to the press." "To whom?" Nate said. "To the SEC and the FBI simultaneously," Maya said, "so that no one person can suppress it and no one agency can be pressured to look away." "That takes time," Nate said. "Then we buy time," Maya said. "We give Beverly a reason to slow Richard down. We give Jessica a reason to step back. We give Gerald Flynn a reason to be very, very afraid. And then," she looked at Nate, "we wait." "You're good at waiting," he said. "I've been doing it my whole life," she said. "I waited for Danny to be old enough to protect. I waited for a scholarship that almost didn't come. I waited." She stopped. Something moved in her face, brief and real, the crack in the architecture of a woman who had been holding things for too long. "I waited 14 months for a reason to open that file." The crack sealed itself. She picked up the medical folder. She straightened it. She put it back in the box with her mother's belongings and closed the lid. "Not anymore," she said. "We move now, just carefully." "Together," Danny said. It was the first word he'd contributed in 20 minutes. He said it with the simple certainty of 17, without qualification, without strategy, without the complicated hedging of adults who had learned that certainty was dangerous. Maya looked at him. Something in her face did the thing it only did when she looked at Danny, opened slightly, the specific softening of a person who has one person in the world they love without complication. Together, she said. Nate looked at both of them, the girl who had been holding everything and the boy who had been holding the one thing she couldn't, sitting in a kitchen in Pilsen over cold tea and 3 documents that were going to dismantle a senator, a board chairman, a shell company, and 40 years of a woman's careful, invisible architecture. He picked up his phone. He texted Sandra, full package, SEC filing format, FBI parallel, timeline 3 weeks. He put the phone down. Together, he said. Jessica Harlow was on her 42nd floor on a Wednesday morning when Nate called. She was in her kitchen, the kitchen that had been designed by the same firm that did the rest of the apartment, all white stone and concealed appliances, and the kind of order that requires constant maintenance, drinking coffee from a machine that cost $4,000, and produce something technically perfect and entirely without character, which she had decided long ago was a reasonable trade. She was in a silk robe, her hair down, the specific state of someone who is between performances, not yet assembled for the world, not yet the version of herself that the world got to see. She looked at Nate's name on her phone. She let it ring twice. She answered, "Good morning." "I need to see you today," Nate said. "Not at the office, somewhere private." She heard something in his voice that she had not heard in 18 months of knowing him, not anger, not distance, but a specific quality of resolution, like a decision had been made and he was on the other side of it. "How serious?" she said. 12 years serious, he said. The specific phrasing landed in a way she didn't understand but felt, a phrase with a number in it, with a time frame, pointing at something specific. "My apartment," she said. 1 hour, he said. He arrived at 10. He was in dark jeans and a jacket, and he had a document in his hand, not a folder, not a file, just a single sheet in a clear protective sleeve. The kind of sleeve that said this needs to be preserved exactly as it is. He handed it to her before he sat down, before he said anything, the way Maya had told him to let her hold it first. She took it. She looked at the handwriting through the sleeve. She looked at her name at the top. She read it. She read it twice. She was a fast reader. She had always been a fast reader. But she read it twice because the first time through she was processing the content, and the second time through she was processing the implications. And by the time she finished the second reading, she was sitting on the white couch in the silk robe with the letter in her lap, and something on her face that had not been there in a very long time. "He had this," she said. "For 12 years, Nate said. He told me," she stopped. She looked at the ceiling for a moment. "He told me that year that you weren't interested, that you'd asked him to, that you'd told him you weren't. I believed him." She looked at Nate. "I believed him because he was the person I trusted." "I know. And you thought I didn't respond because you weren't interested," Nate said. "And I moved on. It's what you do." "And then Diane," she said. "And then Diane." She looked at the letter. "Nate, I'm not telling you this to restart something," he said clearly, because clarity was what she needed and what she deserved. "I'm telling you because you had a right to know this 12 years ago and you didn't because of Richard. And because what Richard is doing now to the company, to me, to Maya," he paused. "He's been using people for a long time. You're one of them. I thought you should know." She was quiet for a moment. She looked at the letter. She looked at her $4,000 coffee machine on the kitchen counter. She thought about 18 months of a relationship that had been comfortable and emotionally empty, and that she had told herself was sophisticated and was now understanding might have been, at least partially, a manipulation, Richard keeping her close to Nate, in the right position, waiting for the moment she'd be useful. "What is he planning?" she said. Nate told her, all of it. Sandra's findings, the vantage point structure, Frank DeLuca, the gala, Diane's refusal, Beverly's photograph, Carol Collins and Patricia Crane and Gerald Flynn, and the slow, precise machinery of a plan that had been running for 4 years and had now been traced back to its source. Jessica listened without interrupting. She was good at listening. She was better at it than most people gave her credit for, which was, Nate now understood, one of the things Richard had valued about her. Not her intelligence, which was considerable, but her discipline. Her ability to hold information without leaking it. Her ability to be present in rooms without changing them. "Senator Price," she said when he finished. "You know the name," Nate said. "Richard mentioned him once," she said, 6 weeks ago. He used his name and then moved past it quickly, the way Richard moves past things he doesn't want to dwell on. "I filed it." She looked at Nate. "I can get you the Wednesday lunch records. I have a personal calendar that Richard doesn't know about. Every meeting we had I documented. Dates, locations, what was discussed." Nate looked at her. "Why?" She held his gaze. "Because I'm not an amateur," she said, "and because I knew somewhere that there would come a morning when I would need to account for what I'd done, and I didn't want to account for it without receipts." "You were building an exit," he said. "I was building insurance," she said. "Same thing, different framing." He was quiet for a moment. "Jessica." "I know what I did," she said. "I agreed to something I shouldn't have agreed to, for reasons I could defend and reasons I couldn't." She set the letter on the cushion beside her. "I'm not asking for absolution. I'm asking for the chance to be useful in the right direction for once." He looked at her. He thought about Maya saying she's not the enemy, she's a lever Richard used. He thought about the specific, uncomplicated moral accuracy of a woman who gave away muffins she paid for herself, and then decided, from that same moral position, that the person who had been manipulated and the person doing the manipulating were not the same category of problem. "The calendar," he said. "Sandra needs everything in it." "I'll send it this afternoon," Jessica said. She picked up the letter. "Can I keep this?" "It's yours," he said. "It always was." She looked at it one more time. She set it on the glass coffee table with the careful deliberateness of something being placed rather than discarded. She picked up her coffee. "Tell Maya," she said, "that I have good taste in men and terrible taste in alliances." "Tell her yourself," Nate said. "You're going to meet her." Jessica looked at him. Something crossed her face, not quite a smile, not quite resignation, something that was both and neither. "Is she going to like me?" "Probably not immediately," Nate said, "but she's going to respect you, which is more valuable." "Yes," Jessica said, "it is." He left at 11. Jessica sat in the white apartment for 20 minutes after he left, in the silk robe, with the $4,000 coffee and the letter on the glass table, and the specific quality of a Wednesday morning that had rearranged itself completely between 9 and 11. Then she got up. She got dressed, efficiently, without ceremony, the way she got dressed when she had things to do. She opened her personal calendar on the tablet she kept in the drawer Richard had never asked about. She began to prepare the document. 47 Wednesday lunches. Every location, every subject discussed, every name mentioned, every number referenced. It was, she thought as she worked, the most useful thing she had done in 6 months. She was not going to waste the feeling. Sandra Ose found the forum analyst in 4 hours. She called Nate at 3 p.m. on Wednesday afternoon with the particular energy of someone who has found something significant and is managing their own response to it with professional discipline. "The username on the forum thread," she said, "traces to a handle used consistently across 3 financial watchdog platforms over 7 years. The IP addresses, I'll spare you the methodology, narrow to a specific building on South Michigan Avenue. The building houses 3 offices, 2 law firms, and 1 private investigation firm." "A pie," Nate said. "Not just any pie," Sandra said. "The firm is called Meridian Investigations. It's run by a former SEC enforcement officer named Carl Briggs, 63 years old, retired from the SEC 8 years ago after 22 years of securities fraud investigation. He's been running Meridian for 7 years. His client list is confidential. A pause. But the forum post about Vantage Point LLC was published 2 years ago. Which means someone hired Carl Briggs to look into CrossVault, or into Vantage Point specifically, 2 years ago. Someone already knew, Nate said. Someone already suspected and paid a professional to investigate, Sandra corrected. And either Briggs found the structure and his client didn't act on it, or Briggs found it and the client's attempt to act on it was suppressed. We need to talk to Briggs, Nate said. I have an appointment at 5, Sandra said. I took the liberty. Of course you did. The meeting with Carl Briggs took place in the offices of Meridian Investigations on the 11th floor of the South Michigan Avenue building, a space that was the functional opposite of CrossVault's floors, practical, dense with filing, 2 desks and a whiteboard, and the specific organized chaos of a place where the work was the priority and the environment was not. Carl Briggs was 63, heavyset, with the specific watchful calm of someone who had spent 22 years at the SEC looking at financial systems that were designed to be opaque and had developed, over those 22 years, a profound patience with opacity. He looked at Nate across the desk with the particular expression of a man who has been expecting a meeting and is relieved it's finally happening. You're 2 years late, he said. Tell me who hired you, Nate said. Briggs looked at him for a moment, then he said, Edmund Cross. The name landed in the room and stayed there. Nate sat very still. Sandra beside him did not move. Your grandfather hired me 8 years ago, Briggs said. He'd noticed discrepancies in the acquisition pipeline, small ones, things most people would miss. He didn't want to bring them internally because he didn't know yet how deep it went. He hired me to look. A pause. I found Vantage Point 18 months into the investigation. I found the Cayman structure 6 months after that. I documented everything and brought it to Edmund. And Nate said. He died 4 months later, Briggs said. Heart attack. I had a complete package ready for him. I showed up at his office for our scheduled meeting and was told he'd been hospitalized the night before. He looked at Nate with the steady eyes of a man carrying something for a long time. He left me a letter, through his personal attorney, separate from the will, delivered to me 3 days after the funeral. It said, and I have it if you want to see it, it said that he had been unable to act on the information during his lifetime because he didn't yet know the full chain of command. He believed there was someone above Richard. He told me to continue the investigation and to deliver the complete package to you when, his words, when Nate is ready to use it rather than just know it. Nate was completely still. Edmund had known. Edmund had been building a countercase for 8 years and had died before he could hand it over. The investigation that Sandra had just conducted in 2 weeks had been running, quietly, for 8 years under Nate's nose, because Edmund had decided correctly that Nate needed to be protected from partial information and would only be ready for the complete picture when the circumstances demanded it. Senator Harold Price, Nate said. Briggs nodded slowly. He's at the top of it. Richard is the mechanism. Beverly, he paused. Beverly is complicated. Tell me. Beverly didn't choose Price, Briggs said. Price approached her, 5 years ago, through a mutual contact in the Evanston social circuit. He offered to support Richard's claim to CrossVault leadership if Beverly provided access to company events, to board relationships, to the social infrastructure she'd spent 30 years building. She agreed. He paused. What she didn't know, and what I believe she's figured out since, is that Price's interest in CrossVault is not about Richard's ambition. It's about a specific portfolio company that CrossVault acquired 3 years ago. A logistics company called Meridian Freight, different from my firm, common name, that Price has been using to move unreported campaign funds through a series of freight billing adjustments for 4 years. Money laundering, Sandra said, not a question. Campaign finance fraud, Briggs said, which carries federal charges. Price needed Cross-Vault's new leadership to be someone who would not audit Meridian Freight specifically. Richard would not audit it because Richard would be told not to. Nate would audit everything, Sandra said. Nate audits everything, Briggs confirmed, which is why Edmund chose him and why Price needed him gone. The office was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, South Michigan Avenue moved in both directions, cars and pedestrians and the city doing the city, indifferent as always. Edmund knew about Price, Nate said. He suspected, he didn't have the proof yet. Briggs opened his bottom desk drawer and removed a file box, standard banker's box, labeled in careful handwriting. I have 8 years of documentation, he said. Vantage Point, the Cayman structure, DeLuca, Price's connection through Meridian Freight, the campaign finance trail, all of it. He pushed the box across the desk. It's yours. It was always yours. Nate looked at the box. He thought about his grandfather, about a man who had built something and then spent the last years of his life quietly building its defense, knowing he might not live to use it, making sure it would be there when it was needed. He thought about Edmund at dinner saying, "Don't confuse building and owning." He thought about an old man shaking Nate's hand at a memorial and saying, "Edmund was proudest of you, son." And he thought about what that man had been covering with that handshake, what Frank DeLuca had been doing in the years since. Every Christmas card and every little league Saturday, a layer of performance over a fundamental and deliberate betrayal. Carol Collins, Nate said. Briggs looked at him. Something in the name registered not surprise but recognition. Edmund's file includes a note about a home health aide who photographed documents in Flynn's apartment, he said carefully. He flagged it as a potential witness. He noted her name. She's dead, Nate said. Her daughter is Maya Collins. Briggs looked at him for a long moment. I'm sorry, he said. Her cancer diagnosis was delayed, Nate said. Patricia Crane, Gerald Flynn's daughter-in-law. Briggs was quiet. Then, that's not in Edmund's file, that came after. Yes. That means Flynn escalated, Briggs said. On his own or under Price's direction. Carol photographed the documents Flynn found out, and someone made a call to Patricia Crane. I need that provable, Nate said. Not suspected, provable. I can work on it, Briggs said. Give me 48 hours. You have 24, Nate said. Things are moving. He picked up the file box. He stood. He looked at Carl Briggs, a 63-year-old man who had been carrying an 8-year investigation in a drawer, waiting for the right moment to hand it to the right person, the way Edmund had asked him to. Thank you, Nate said, for keeping it. Edmund was a good man, Briggs said simply. Good men deserve to have their work finished. Senator Harold Price had a gift for rooms. He entered them differently from most powerful people, not with the energy of someone who needed the room to recognize them, but with the easy warmth of someone who was genuinely delighted to find themselves wherever they were. This was not performance. Or rather, it had begun as performance 40 years ago and had been practiced so thoroughly that it had become indistinguishable from character, which was the most dangerous thing a performance could become. He was at a fundraising lunch at the Radisson Blue Aqua on East Randolph Street when his phone vibrated in his jacket pocket. He did not look at it. He was mid-sentence with a technology executive whose company he needed something from, and Senator Harold Price had a rule. When you are with someone, be entirely with them. Nothing communicates importance more efficiently than undivided attention. And nothing Harold Price had was more valuable than the sense he could make people feel that they were, in this moment, the most important person in his world. He finished the lunch at 2 p.m. He shook hands at the length and warmth that conveyed exactly what he intended to convey and nothing he didn't. He took his phone out in the elevator. 3 missed calls. Richard. Beverly. and a number he didn't recognize, which was the most interesting of the three because Senator Harold Price did not receive calls from numbers he didn't recognize without someone deciding he should. He called the unknown number last, after listening to Richard's message. "Things are moving faster than expected. Call me," and Beverly's, "We need to speak today, privately, not by phone." Beverly saying not by phone was Beverly saying this is significant, which was Beverly saying something has gone wrong. The unknown number was answered on the second ring. "Senator Price," said a woman's voice, measured, professional, carrying the specific authority of someone who was not impressed by his title. "My name is Sandra Osai. I'm calling on behalf of Nathaniel Cross." Price had been in political life for 19 years. He had received bad news in many forms and from many directions, and had developed, through genuine effort and genuine intelligence, the ability to receive it with complete external composure while processing it internally at high speed. He used that ability now. "Ms. Osai," he said warmly, "what can I do for you?" "You can be at a meeting on Friday," Sandra said. "Mr. Cross has some information he'd like to discuss with you, privately, before it goes anywhere else." "What kind of information?" "The kind that involves Meridian Freight," Sandra said, "and a Cayman Islands entity called Vantage Point LLC, and 8 years of documentation that was compiled by Edmund Cross before his death." The elevator had long since reached Price's floor. He was standing in the corridor of the Radisson Blu, 40 feet from a window that looked out over the Chicago River, completely still. A hotel housekeeper pushed a cart past him and said, "Good afternoon," and he nodded and smiled with the automatic warmth of his gift for rooms, because some things were too deeply practiced to stop. "Friday," he said. "Where?" "Mr. Cross will send the details," Sandra said. "He asks that you come alone and that you speak to no one about this call." "And if I don't come?" "Then the documentation goes to the SEC and the FBI simultaneously on Monday morning," Sandra said. "And the call record of this conversation goes with it."